Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from the upcoming Riverside Theatre production of The Lifespan of a Fact. Adam Knight, director at Riverside and director of this show.
Yep, good to be
here. And also Martin Andrews, who plays, well, we'll dig into who you play because that's really interesting. Welcome, both of you. Glad to have you both here. Adam, tell me a little bit about the genesis of The Lifespan of a Fact, because it is both uniquely constructed and also something we can only do here in Iowa. Sort of.
The play is based on a book by John D'Agata, Iowa City resident, one of the heads of the nonfiction writers workshop here, and a fact checker named Jim Fingal. Back in the late aughts, John wrote an essay that then got fact-checked, and they realized there were a lot of embellishments that had happened. And it led to a 7-year back and forth between John and his fact-checker that then led to this amazing book called The Lifespan of a Fact. That book led to a tour where John and Jim were going around to bookshops around the country and kind of reading these dialogues that they were having. And a few playwrights and a producer saw it and said, this would make a great play. And so they took this dialogue and really telescoped it into this crazy weekend with a deadline looming, where the fact checker and the editor and the author, who is John D'Agata in the play, all have to come to some conclusions about what is truth, what is the responsibility of an artist, and can we make this essay work by 7 a.m. on Monday? And it's a comedy, but it also deals with, I think, real huge literary and artistic questions that are coming up even more and more now that facts become very subjective.
Especially since today, sometimes we can't agree
exactly
on what a fact is. Oh, what an interesting, well, certainly an interesting origin and an interesting construction. And Martin, you actually play John D'Agata in this.
That's correct. And we had a great meeting. He got to come in and talk to us, it's very unique for an actor to meet the person that they're playing.
It's one thing to play a person out of history, and even a person in history who is still alive, but to actually have them come in and sit down and talk to you.
Yeah.
So John writes this book, sends it off to a fact checker who says, yeah, these aren't facts. Mm-hmm. And did he talk about what his initial, because I'm sure that when he wrote the book, he had every intention of telling the truth. And then to be told he got his own story wrong.
Yeah. I would think that he would say, what do you mean by the truth? When it comes to the essay, he when he visited us, he talked about how the genre of nonfiction was created around 1903 by a very prurient librarian who did not like fiction, thought that fiction would lead us to, evil things or something. So he published a paper and said, well, let's bring all the nonfiction together and direct people to that in our libraries. And when he did that, when the term nonfiction was coined, it brought together all these diverse literary genres like travel logs and essays and biographies, and it lumped them together and gave them one standard, which was like a journalistic standard. Everything needs to be fact-based. Essays hadn't been fact-based. They'd been my experience or a memoir, my experience, and you don't have to check every tiny little fact. And I think John would say that today, is that he was very intentional in his embellishments. He didn't do it on accident. He did it on purpose.
We have to assume, whenever we see a nonfiction essay or a nonfiction book that, say, reproduces conversations from people, we don't think about it, but we have to assume that those are maybe not necessarily the exact words that people spoke, because unless you had a tape recorder running, who would know?
Yeah. I mean, they get in this argument about the color of something in the play, where I say that it's red, and then the fact checker goes and sees it that it's brown, and I'm like, well, at that time of day I saw it was red. And then you get down to like, oh, what's somebody's perception of color? And does that need to be fact-checked? And how do you do that?
I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Yes, you're wrong.
You've got a 3-person cast, and you have brought back the great Megan Gogarty to the Riverside stage.
Gracing the stage in a play she didn't write.
Yes.
So it's a huge event in our theater ecosystem. And Megan is joined with Martin, of course, and with an amazing performer, Elijah Jones, who was recently in It's a Wonderful Life with us and did the flick. Just an amazing comedic performer. And it's a tour de force, and you get to watch these 3 great actors, but also incredibly powerful personalities just spar with each other. It kind of reminds me in a weird way of a dialogue by Plato, where you've got like this person represents this viewpoint, this person represents this viewpoint, and watching them go at it. But it's a lot more fun than reading Plato.
Again, the original source material, the book, and then kind of the tour that these 2 men went out and did bookstores and stuff. Does the play then have that same feel of 2 people talking to each other, or is it more plays out? Sounds like it plays out more in real time. We've got to get this thing published by Monday, and it's the back and forth.
The playwrights did a great job of making it a pressure cooker, where the stakes are incredibly urgent. And to their great credit, I think that they find a way to make this dialogue, which could easily be esoteric, feel so visceral and really funny. And it's a great play, I think, for a literary town like Iowa City. There's a lot of references that I think our audience will particularly get.
Oh, okay. So there are a few perhaps Iowa City-centric, or Iowa City, the personality of Iowa City comes through.
Certainly the literary, I would say in some ways, in the nicest way possible, the literary snobbery, I think is mentioned a few times.
I think we have to own that.
We love it. It's a great quality. And I should mention that the play premiered on Broadway in 2018 in a production that had Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame in it. And I love that this play about literature was a hit on Broadway and is now being done all around. But this is the Iowa City premiere, so we're the only ones who can say that we're doing it in the town that John D'Agata lives in.
Now, John, of course, is a real person. Are the other 2 characters, are they real people, based on real people?
So the fact checker is Jim Fingal.
Okay.
So based on the real Jim Fingal, and the editor is Emily. Who is, I believe, an amalgamation of some sure. editors who are involved in the process, and a bit of a fancy.
Yeah. So, Martin, we talked about how John talked with you a little bit about his thought process and things like that. Easier or harder to create a character when you have literally met the person who is that character?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think John, when he visited us, and then Adam in his direction, have clearly stated that this character is not John D'Agata. And John was clear about that. He said, sometimes make this guy a jerk, like sometimes he's a jerk. And then also, I think their intention was to create these 2 sort of polar opposites, the fact checker and John, almost to an absurd degree. And when you get those polar opposites together, then sparks happen and comedy happens. And he said embrace the humor of it as well, and embrace the way that these 2 absurd viewpoints clash. So I think that was like, oh, I've got a blank check. I can do whatever I want. So that was helpful.
Sounds like, on the one hand, you look at the synopsis of this and you go, ooh, heavy stuff. But it sounds like it's really funny.
It is really funny. So I would say that it's some of the most fun I've had on stage in a while.
The Lifespan of a Fact opens April 18th at Riverside Theatre and runs through the 4th of May. And I'm guessing that since you have access to the principals in this, Adam, you're going to have some kind of fun talkbacks, too.
Yep, the first Saturday, April 19th, John D'Agata will be joining for a post-show discussion about the play. And then the second Sunday, we have the illustrious Miriam Gilbert joining me and the cast.
And if we want tickets, we can get them at your website, which is?
www.riversidetheatre.org.
Well, this just sounds like a blast. Fiction and nonfiction and humor all rolled up in one. I love it. Thanks a lot for coming in, and good luck with it.
Great. Thanks, Dennis.
All right, thank you.
You can hear The Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:30, on demand at kcck.org/culture, or subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Watch our videos on the KCCK Facebook and YouTube channels. Our producer is Lydia Kilgore. The Culture Crawl theme is composed by Vivian Shanley. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.